Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of Oxnard Live. I'm your host, Daniel Chavez Jr. After witnessing yesterday a historic event with the first female vice president in U.S. history, we're keeping with that trend and speaking with former Oxnard Mayor Tim Flynn, who, over his career serving on the Oxnard City Council, has accomplished a lot. We're going to be talking about that, his plans for the future, and his thoughts on the vacancy for District 2. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming former Oxnard Mayor Tim Flynn. Mayor Flynn.
Hi, how you doing, Daniel?
How are you?
Uh, couldn't be better. I'm in the best shape of my life.
There you go. Retirement looks well on you. No
Well, I
stress.
won't. I just say this: I'm taking a 6 month break, and I'm getting a lot done. But one of the things I'm doing is working out a lot. Not as much weightlifting, a lot of cardiovascular, and I feel fantastic.
You look good, Mayor.
Thank
So
you.
let's get right into it. I do want to talk about real quick because as we saw yesterday, the swearing in of the first female vice president in U.S. history over 200 years. Your background, your history, you actually worked in DC. How was that for you watching the swearing in of the first female vice president?
Well, I would say even just starting, I actually used to work in the Capitol building, and so when the riots took place, some couple weeks ago, whatever, there when the rioters were in Statuary Hall, I used to work in an office just off of Statuary Hall, so it was like I was in absolute disbelief. I was literally looking at the door where I would enter to go into work, and there was a situation, developing. And then, of course, on the east side of the Capitol, watching on TV, the swearing in, it's an amazing thing, and I think it's a great testament. It's kind of somewhat ironic. Even I don't even know if it's paradoxical, but it's ironic that given what just took place a couple of weeks ago in the Capitol building, to have something so refreshing take place in having the first female vice president in the history of the United States being sworn in. So, to me, I think it's extremely important because Barack Obama shattered the color barrier when he was elected president. So I think the fact that a woman was elected as vice president is something amazing, and it was amazing to watch. And I think it is. It's just I don't know. It was a little amazing what had taken place in the Capitol just a couple of weeks ago, and then watching that swearing in. There couldn't be any greater of a contrast.
I completely agree with you. I want to talk a little bit about how you got into the public's view. Surprisingly, there are still people out there that don't know how you even got onto the city council back in 2004. And then later on, you would go on to become mayor in 2012. So tell us the process, because if I remember correctly, you were speaking with your late wife that of trying to determine where you guys wanted to buy your home at. So tell us how that led into going into public office.
Well, as you know, I live in the historic district downtown on F Street. Some people know it more by the Christmas Street, where Christmas decorations, and then for Halloween, there's a lot of trick-or-treaters that come to F Street. So it's in the Henry T. Oxnard Historic District. And, it's amazing because I used to walk by the house that I live in, Daniel, almost every day on my way home, back and forth to Santa Clara Elementary. So I went to school right around the corner, and my intention was always to live in Oxnard, and in particular, very much identified with the historic district. It's a part of my childhood, part of the elementary school. Santa Clara happens to be the parish where I attend church, at least pre-COVID, and I'm looking forward to getting back there once the COVID situation changes. But my wife and I moved here into the Henry T. Oxnard Historic Neighborhood in 1998. So I've lived here in this home now 22 years. And for me, because I've lived in so many different places, after growing up here in the city of Oxnard, that it was just great. It felt like I was coming home, moving here to F Street. And one of the things that happened when I moved here to F Street is that I saw that there were things that were going on here in the neighborhood that weren't consistent with the really high quality of life that I experienced as a child growing up here in the city of Oxnard. And one of them was in particular graffiti. And I'll never forget it. Coming outside of my home one day to get the newspaper. At the time, I'd get the print paper. Now I get, I get a digital. I have a digital subscription. And I walked outside of my home, and my neighbor has about 8 pillars on his fence. And somebody had gone by, and this was a problem even prior to this incident. Somebody had gone by and they tagged every one of the columns on the fence. And I remember, I mean, it was that, how it hit me. It was such a visceral feeling of just of anger, of enormous disappointment, of just, the pride of Oxnard and the pride of the Henry T. Oxnard in historic district. I was so incensed, Daniel, by what I saw, that I called I called the city, and then they came over and they eventually removed it. But I said to my wife after that, because St. John's Hospital, the old St. John's Hospital down the street, was in disrepair. It looked like a bombed out building. And, we had the graffiti issue. There was more crime in the neighborhood, just a lot of quality of life issues. And I just looked at my wife one day and said, Julie, I just, I think I want to run for the city council. And Daniel, I might say that I was already active in my neighborhood council, so the Wilson neighborhood. So I was getting involved, and I was getting more of a bird's eye view about, what was happening not only in my neighborhood, but what was happening in the city. And these quality of life issues really mean a lot to me, and they meant a lot to me then. And so I decided, I'm going to throw my hat in the ring, and I'm going to run. And, I as you know, my father served on the Ventura County Board of Supervisors for 32 years. And so I grew up in a family where public service was the mantra of the Flynn family. I mean, there was nothing, I think, more that left an impression on me is that both my mom and my dad, because my mom was my dad's right-hand woman, and is still today my dad's right-hand woman, that my mom and dad were so committed to just doing good things, helping people out, getting involved in the community. And then, of course, when my dad ran for the Ventura County Board of Supervisors, it was just a natural thing growing up. I mean, if your family owns a market, you're probably going to work in the market. Well, in my family, when it came to election time, we were involuntarily recruited to walk precincts. And so that's where I got this addiction, Daniel, to walking door to door, is from my dad. And so I can't say I just went into it cold. I had the experience from my dad. And then I watched what he did on the Board of Supervisors. And I always said, to my wife, Julie, Julie, if I can accomplish just 25% of what my dad accomplished, I'll consider myself a success. So whether I've done that already as mayor and my tenure as mayor, I can't really say. I did accomplish, I believe, a lot. But that's how I got involved really here locally. And I'll be honest with you, I did not think I would ever be a candidate for the city council, but it was what I saw here in the city, how the city had changed. In many respects, the city had changed for the positive, but there are many other respects, as anything else in life, where things had gone the other way. And I wanted to make sure that that didn't continue to happen.
Thank you. And I want to ask, because 2012 wasn't the first time you ran for mayor. You actually ran for mayor before. That's how you had that 2-year gap between your first term on the city council to rejoining the city council back in 2010. What was the motivation, the drive to say, hey, you know what? I want to take that top spot and lead the council?
Well, when I ran, as you stated correctly, so I was on the city council from 2004 to 2008. And then I ran for mayor against then the incumbent, Tom Holden. I also led an initiative on traffic at the same time. That was a tough lesson to learn. That trying to pursue, it's like having a two-front war. It's not a good idea. Hasn't been a good idea in history, and it wasn't a good idea for me. And so I had an initiative on traffic called the Oxnard Traffic Initiative. And there were things going on in the city. I thought the city, development is normal. Development's healthy for any economy. I mean, and we've seen what's happened when communities resist housing and risk things like that. You have a shortage of housing, as we do not only here locally, but in the state of California. So I was just alarmed at what was going on in the city. I felt that the pace of development was just far too fast, and the infrastructure wasn't keeping up, and in particular traffic. And so that led me to challenge the then incumbent Tom Holden for mayor. Had nothing to do with whether I liked or disliked him. I actually like him very much. He's a friend of mine, so it was very hard for me to actually run against someone I consider a friend. But I just felt so compelled that the city was not going in the right direction, and I felt that even though, again, I knew development is a healthy thing. Some people think it's unhealthy. I think it's a very healthy thing. I just felt that the pace of development was far too fast. And as I said before, traffic and many other issues were not being kept up with. So that's, why I ran for mayor in 2008 instead of running for reelection on the city council. And I lost, and the traffic initiative lost, and my dad, John Flynn, lost. So for those people that worked, against me and or my dad and the initiative, it was kind of like, the equivalent of a bowling strike, right? They knocked all three of us out. There was about $900,000 that was spent in that combination of that campaign against myself, my dad, and the initiative. But I learned a lot of lessons from that, and as I've learned a lesson from my most recent defeat for the Ventura County Board of Supervisors. But I think my drive to run for mayor, simply put, was I wanted to lead the city in a certain direction. And I believe, even though you never really feel like you've accomplished everything, I mean, I don't think anyone leaves public office saying, I'm 100% certain I accomplished 100% of everything I set out to accomplish. But the things that I set out to accomplish in Oxnard city government, I believe I accomplished. And I'm very proud of that.
Yeah, which leads me to the next question of, if you could go back to that 2008 race, would you have jumped into that mayor seat, or would you have ran for reelection? Because during that time, the mayor seat was every 2 years. Would you have just waited and maybe ran when you would have been able to just keep your seat, or would you have continued to do the same steps that you took?
Well, it's always great, easy to play Monday morning quarterback, and it's easy to say, well, I should have run for the city council for reelection on the city council, and that probably would have been the wisest decision, simply because the capacity of any one person. I mean, I was gathering signatures for that initiative until sometimes 11 o'clock at night. I mean, it was insane. I was working full time as a teacher. I was working 20 to 30 hours a week as a city councilman. And then I was gathering signatures another 30 hours a week, or something along those lines. It was pretty insane, and trying to run for mayor at the same time. So yeah, every person has limits, and I certainly discovered my limits in that campaign. And but it didn't deter me, as you stated correctly, for running. And it was the DA investigation, the FBI and the DA raiding City Hall, of course, in 2010, that not only I actually had put in my papers to run for city council before that took place, but once that took place, I knew that I was going to have a really good chance of getting elected. And in fact, in that year, 2010, I was the top vote getter. So, and then it was kind of a natural course for me to run for mayor 2 years later, when the incumbent decided not to run for reelection, and I ran, and I was successful. And I was mayor for 8 years. So I feel really, really fortunate.
Now, how was that? In 2012, you ran against Carmen Ramirez, who is the supervisor for the 5th district now. and Dr. Irene Pinkard. You worked with both of them on the city council. And then in 2012, the three of you, all threw your name in to run for mayor. How was that? I know you said you liked former Oxnard Mayor Tom Holden, and that you guys are friends, and but yet you ran against him. How was that dynamic running against Carmen Ramirez and Dr. Irene Pinkard?
Well, I think the point is I don't take things personally. I mean, sure. I mean, when you lose an election, I've lost 3 elections. So I'm seven. I think I'm 7-3 or 8-3. So I have a good record. I'm not as good as maybe Tommy Lasorda, but I have a good record, and or a high batting average. I'll take the batting average, and so I'll take that any day, a 700 batting average. So, you know, I don't take things personally for the most part. Although when a person loses an election, you do take that personally, but not against your opponents. I mean, I never had any ill will towards Tom Holden, still don't, you know, to this day, and I consider Carmen Ramirez, you know, a very good friend, and the same thing with Irene Pinkard. I mean, I never took these things personally, and I never attacked them personally. So I just my style isn't to attack people. My style is to debate the issues and try to you know really draw that out. And to me, that's what's important is talking about the issues. I'm less concerned about personality, you know, the People magazine aspect of politics, which actually is one of the strongest and most compelling aspects of political life, is just the people side of politics rather than the issue side. Most people, Daniel, are not really aware of the issues. Most people don't really know the issues. And I would contend, most recently when I ran for county supervisor, that the majority of the people who voted had absolutely no idea what I had accomplished or what I stood for and what my opponent stood for, Carmen, and what she had accomplished. The overwhelming majority didn't have anything to do with that. So that remains both a compelling kind of statement about politics and political life, but also sometimes a very disappointing one because people sometimes vote for the wrong reasons. They select people for the wrong reasons, and that's unfortunate. So the job is to try to get more people involved, get more people educated on the issues. So when they make decisions, they're making decisions on issues, not on personalities, not on anything else.
Completely agree with you. Now, which brings us to our next part. You had actually built the nickname the Walker because around campaign season, you would be knocking on doors from midday all the way late into the evening. And even at a couple of candidate forums, you would show the sole of your shoes, how worn out that they were. Where did that type of ethic of knocking on doors and getting in front of people, where did that come from?
My dad. My dad, I tell people this. My dad was a maniac when it came to campaign time, and he would start walking a year and a half before the election. Not a month and a half, you know, not a half, a year and a half. And there were times where he'd knock on every door in Oxnard. And so I got that ethic, that work ethic, and outside of campaigning, the work ethic. I saw how hard my dad worked. You know, he worked regularly, 16 hours a day, sometimes 7 days a week. I remember for years he didn't take vacations. He just worked and worked and worked. He loved his job, and so I got that work ethic from my dad, but also my mom. I mean, my mom and dad raised 6 children. I'm the oldest of 6 children. And I saw how hard both my mom and dad worked. And so that's where I got that. But there's no question about it. When it comes to walking, it's my dad. And let me tell you, Daniel, at the end of the month, I'll be 62 years old and I'm just as capable. I'm in better shape today than I've ever been in my life. I'm ready to start walking now. I have no idea what for what, but I want to get going. I got a lot of energy. And that was one of the really pitfalls of this most recent race, that the COVID-19 pandemic grounded my operation for at least 5 months. I figured I walked for 5 months, but I was unable to walk for 5 months. But when I looked at the results, and if you have any other questions about the election, and when I think about that, what was happening nationally, the George Floyd situation, when it goes on and on and on, when I think about all of those factors, and then the high voter turnout, I would have had to have started just like my dad a year and a half in advance to even have a chance to win under the circumstances that I was running. So walking is a passion, and I'm ready to start it now. I don't know if you know. I mean, like I said, I have some good ideas about what I would talk to people about, but I might just start walking. I might be the first non-candidate in history to start walking without an office that I'm running for. So, I love walking that much. It's a passion.
Which brings me into, not only were you a public figure, you were also a high school teacher, which for many would be very, very difficult to do. When I first got involved in listening to city council back in 2015, many times our meetings would go into midnight, 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. And as a teacher, school starts at 8 o'clock in the morning. How was that, from 2004 up until your retirement from the school district and mayor? How was that for you to still participate in all these events taking place around town, still leading the council during their meetings? And before, it was weekly meetings. Every week there was a meeting for city council before we transitioned to the committees. How was that, trying to balance both and then balance the family as well?
Well, understated to say difficult. And I would just say that the way I did it was, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. I got that from, my dad, that worth ethic. There were times I'm here in my backyard right now. It looks a lot better than it did when I was on the city council and I was working a number of jobs. But I remember times I'd come home here and I'd be raking leaves I didn't have a gardener at the time either. And I would be raking leaves at midnight, and putting them into the trash can because I didn't want to miss out on the trash collection, and then get behind on the yard. It was I can't, even with a high energy level, it was very, very challenging to work those jobs, and then especially when the council meetings would go on too late. And it's a little bit ironic because former Mayor Holden, he was actually a lot more permissive when it came to people speaking, the length of time. I think I was more restrictive, but that's because I believe that in an opportunity cost that, if you're sitting at a meeting for 7, 8, 9 hours and it's in the evening, you're really not making decisions operating on all the cylinders are not firing. And it certainly isn't transparent. The average person is smart and they go to bed around 10, 11, maybe 12 at the latest, but they're not staying up, to watch city council meetings at 11, 12 at night. And it was very challenging because I would sometimes go to bed at midnight or 1 in the morning and have to be up at 6 in the morning. And sometimes I'd go to the gym at 6 in the morning and then I'd go to school. So yeah, I don't know how I did it. I couldn't have done it without my wife and my family though. My wife was front and center. So without my wife, I couldn't have done any of this stuff.
See, now you're making me feel a little bad because I don't even go to the gym before going to work and participating. So a lot of energy, and I commend you for that because it's
Thank you.
A lot to be able to work a full-time job as a teacher, all of the committees that the council participates in, and the public really doesn't understand that. Yes, it's a part-time council, but the events and the other outside committees and commissions that the council is a part of, it's ultimately a full-time job, and then try to throw family in there also. So it's a lot. So I commend you for your work ethic on that.
Thank you.
I want to talk about one of the things that you mentioned in the beginning on why you got involved running for public office was the graffiti that you saw around your neighborhood, your neighbor in particular. Somebody came, they tagged their pillars. while on the council, you actually pushed hard to develop the Graffiti Action Program, the GAP program, that was kind of like a full service that would go take down graffiti within 24 hours. What was the process to get that up and going?
Well, first of all, I have to compliment former Mayor Holden because um, he got on board with this graffiti thing along with myself. It was my number one issue in the campaign in 2004. And if he had not gotten involved and put his political capital at stake with the city manager, with the bureaucracy, it would have never happened. So while it was my, at least initial idea, I don't want to take away from the former mayor that, he didn't have similar ideas. Obviously he did, but it was my main focus. It was my main thrust. And he saw, I think, both a commonality in what he wanted to see, and I think he saw a lot of gravitas in the whole idea of removing graffiti and having Oxnard be graffiti free. And he got fully behind it. And by him getting fully behind it, the city manager got it done. I can't say it would have gotten done without his help. So my hat's off to him for really helping the program get started. And then once it got started, we were on a committee together, and it was several staff members, members of the police department, members of the community. The program caught fire. It was so successful that other cities were sending their staff members to our graffiti action committee meetings. And we just had a really good we had a good time. We had a former employee of the city. Her name is Cindy Hookstra, who was actually assigned, half of her duties were assigned in recreation to recreational issues, and the other half were assigned to graffiti. She was very passionate about it. She's very passionate and very good about working with school districts, getting appointments with school districts to educate kids about it. So it was a very, very comprehensive program. And then, like I said, the police department, the graffiti, the crews, I mean, just unbelievable. Maria in particular, but there's so many people. The crews were just outstanding. And you're right. We were like, I believe we here in Oxnard established one of the best programs, not just in the state. I'm starting to think anywhere in the country, where the bottom line is, the motto was, if you spray, you pay. And I don't know if the pay part ever took place, but we certainly have done a good job at getting rid of it in record time. And also it establishes also a certain, what do you want to say, set of values that we have here in the city to say, hey, you know what? Graffiti is not cool. I mean, for a lot of the kids, the boys in particular that do it, they think it's cool. And it's not cool. And it's not something that anybody wants to be involved with. Now, if you want to be an artist, and that was our discussion. I remember at the time, a lot of people would say, well, some of these boys are actually artists, and that's actually true. Let's get them focused on doing artwork. And even if one can consider elements of graffiti artwork, any kind of graffiti that's on somebody else's property that's not yours is vandalism to me, Daniel. It's a crime, and people should be prosecuted for it. But most importantly, the focus we transitioned. In the beginning, because I was angry about it, and I wanted the kids that were involved in this to really learn a lesson. I wanted the kids that were doing this to actually be given community service where they themselves were forced to remove the graffiti that they caused. But then, that is just part of it. And eventually what we were able to do is channel a lot of younger people into city core. And if it weren't for the leadership of one of the most dynamic public servants I've ever met in my life, Efren Gorey, if it wasn't Efren and city core transforming many of the lives of these young men and some girls, that were involved in this kind of activity, I don't know where we'd be, but it evolved over time, and it really has, it made me change too, my outlook, because I have to admit, I had more of a punitive attitude towards it. And I still to an extent do, But I realized that if you're going to not have a revolving door of younger people in and out of juvenile hall, in and out of jail, you have to transform them. You have to transform their lives. And I kind of think that it becomes a set of values that you instill in people. And I think we're partially successful at doing that. And those are some of the things that I really miss about my job on the city council.
Now, I also want to talk about now it's 2012. You're the mayor of the city of Oxnard. You helped led the effort to bring back the Del Norte Recycling Center back under the control of the city, or commonly known as the MRF. What was the push to do that, to bring that large facility back under the control of the city versus having it contracted out?
Well, a lot of it had to do with what was in the district attorney FBI investigation. And for people really, they're listening here today, what this was all about, because there are some listeners saying, FBI, DA, I had no idea about that. When, where, how did that happen? So in essence, a lot of what that whole thing was about public contracting. And as you know, public contracts can go into the millions. And there have to be, or should be, very high standards and ethical standards and legal, restrictions on how those contracts are dispensed and a process. And it's called a procurement process. Well, we did not have a good procurement process, and the MRF was front and center in that whole controversy. In fact, I would say that one individual walked away with $26 million of, in essence, ratepayer money. This is my belief, $26 million. And I wanted to make sure that never happened again. And so when the company that took the contract over for the guy who made the 26 million at the expense of the ratepayer, which it's unfathomable to think that happened. The company that took over the contract, there still was a big profit that they were making. I believe the actual profit was between $1 million and $2 million. That's after all expenses paid by running the Del Norte facility. And again, I have no problem with the private sector running the Del Norte facility, the trash and recycling center. But the fact is that that's ratepayer money, and $1.5 million, $2 million profit I thought was too much. And I was convinced that if the city took over that operation, even after paying generous benefits, health insurance, the retirement system, probably $15 an hour for, the people who work and sort trash and things like that, that the city could do that and still save on that $2 million, $1.5 million. So that was one of my top accomplishments, is leading the council. I had the support of Mayor Pro Tem Ramirez, eventually the rest of the council, and we led the takeover of the trash and recycling facility, saving the taxpayers $2 million a year.
Now, during your time as mayor, and pretty much just on the city council, you always emphasize to any visitor, and in particular the youth, when they visit the council, the same questions always came. Did you do your homework? Did you study? You always emphasize education, and you emphasize family and being able to intervene at the youth level rather than intervening when they're adults already. Which brings us to the next point, that on the city council, for years, you kept pushing for the city to go after some slumlords. And I know a lot of people don't like that word, but you actually led the effort for safe homes, safe families. How was that push to not get the support as soon as you wanted it to get it? And then it wasn't until towards the end of your time on the council when you actually were able to accomplish that.
Daniel, that's a great question. Let me just say that during my first years on the city council, and a lot of it had to do with the conflict between myself and the council majority. So I think, just really being pronounced about things that were going on in the city that I did not like and I didn't think were on the up and up. And so the then council was not receptive to hearing about the fact that there are, I would contend, thousands, maybe even tens of thousands of people that are living in substandard housing conditions. And most importantly, there are people that are profiting massively at the expense of the health and safety of these residents. So I wanted to do something about this. I wanted to once and for all end this, major health and safety issue, and also, make people here in the city, or allow people to see that, hey, I mean, there's nothing to be gained by a landlord stuffing or lining his or her pockets. And again, Daniel, I'm gonna state the record. I like to think that most landlords, most property owners, most property management companies, they're highly ethical people. Some people are in it for business, and God bless them. I hope they make a lot of money. But if you're in the real estate business and you're renting out properties to people that are then subletting those properties out to other people, and you have in a 900 square foot home or 1,000 square foot home, 26 and 36 people living in that home, that to me is criminal, 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 criminal. And anybody knowingly allowing that needs to go to prison. I mean, it sounds very harsh for the mayor to say somebody needs to go to prison. And so just like the graffiti, there was a side of me that was very, the punitive side, where I kind of wanted people that were involved in the more egregious, actions of knowingly renting out smaller units to, 25, 30 people, children, older people, and everything else, that I wanted those people, to go to jail. I really did. But most importantly, it was, what can we do to really kind of solve the problem? And so, and we know that affordability is a big issue. So we know that there's the incentive for people to, a lot of people say, well, wait a minute, how about the actual tenants, because a lot of times they're responsible for it. And that's right. It's not just the landlords, but it's also the tenants. So I was especially focused on, citywide, but I was especially focused on Cuesta del Mar, because I felt that Cuesta del Mar was unlike any other place, maybe not, I can say in the state of California, certainly no other place in Ventura County is as overcrowded and has as much substandard housing, I believe, than Cuesta del Mar. And so I wanted to kind of start, the program was citywide, but I wanted to start my efforts at working with the landlords. So I kind of got away from the punitive side and said, you know what? We got to win people over. We got to win these landlords over. We got to get these landlords to invest in their properties. We got to get these landlords to see that they need to be more proactive, because if there are, my contention is, if there are 25 people living in an apartment, the landlord knows it's going on, or the landlord is not doing their job, right? I mean, most landlords, when they're really conscientious, they're on top of it. And I have a very good friend in the property management business, and she does a great job. And she gave me advice. She said, Tim, there's no way that, she said, any of the properties that we manage, she said, we know if there's an overcrowding problem, we know it right away. And we send people to go there and inspect the property. So that just kind of gives you a little bit of an idea. And that's from a woman who has been involved in property management for like at least 30 years. And so I just really wanted to clean up the problem, really offer solutions. So the idea was work with landlords, make landlords more aware of the fact that we got to get this problem under control, that they need to be more proactive, that if there's a will, there's a way, and then start working with the residents. And so unfortunately the pandemic hit and we weren't able to have the street fairs that I was looking to have. But, just like landlords have responsibilities, tenants have responsibilities. And so I was not only looking to deal with the health and safety issues of these apartments, but uplift these neighborhoods and uplift the quality of life. And that is both a tenant issue, a landlord issue, and a city of Oxnard issue.
I completely agree with you. Um, and I can go on for another 10 items as accomplishments that you have as mayor of the city of Oxnard or your time on the city council. But with every highs, there's also been a few low points that the city council had to face. Um, One in particular was back in 2016, the Measure M initiative that end up passing, but through legal battles, it ended up turning out that it had no standings, and it had to deal with the wastewater rates. A resident tried to challenge the city, saying that you guys were overcharging, that you guys were lying and fibbing on information. It was also during a time of budget cuts, eliminating open positions. Um, how was that for you to be leading the city as the mayor, dealing with wastewater rates after rates hadn't been appropriately raised over the years, and then empty positions, budget cuts? How was that experience for you?
Well, we have to understand, Daniel, and place everything in proper context. We have to understand that no one knows, including myself, no one knows exactly how long financial improprieties took place or how long they went on. Um, I contend they went on for decades. And so where we were at the time that we raised the wastewater, or otherwise known as the sewer system, right? Because it's not just the sewer plant, it's the whole system throughout the city. At the time we raised these rates, and I want to say that and contextualize this for your listeners right now. Those sewer rates were raised by an average of $25 a month over a 5-year period, meaning $5 every year for 5 years, so that if you were paying $50 on your utility bill for the sewer, by the end of that 5-year period, now it was $75. So it went up $25 a month. That's to properly contextualize that. And as you stated correctly, the rates had been raised previously, but not enough to keep up with the infrastructure needs of the sewer plant. That's the bottom line. And what did not do the people of Oxnard any favors whatsoever was Aaron Starr, in particular, leading a movement of, I believe, and again, Mr. Starr and I actually have agreement on many different things about reform, about different ideas about how to approach government and things like that. I've sat down with both he and his wife, Alicia. We've had some great conversations. And what I'm about to say is nothing personally directed at him or attacking him as a person, but he was able to generate a false narrative to the people of Oxnard. This is my belief, a false narrative that the people like myself and the city council, and then Greg Nyhoff, and now Alex Nguyen, the people that were undoing 20 and 30 years of mismanagement, we ourselves were the wrongdoers. We were the criminals. We were the criminals. And that was his narrative that he put out. And the connection that was made, which I think was brilliant. And I can't say he did it intentionally, but I think it just happened as a result of it, is the taxpayers knew that the city was in financial trouble, and they equated the raising of the rates with bailing out the fraud and the illegal acts that had taken place. And nothing further could have been the case. However, I did mention earlier that the city's trash facility, I believe there was a fraudulent and illegal behavior around that. But nothing with the sewer plant ever took place where there was an attempt to raise sewer rates so that you could bail out the city for any kind of financial mismanagement. And the false narrative was many members of the public, maybe up to a third of the public, actually believed that then if the city council and the city manager, we were the ones committing the fraudulent actions. It's almost like people had been asleep at the wheel. They were like Rip Van Winkle, when in fact, we were the ones that were making the difficult choices and standing up for what's right to say, hey, the sewer plant is about ready to collapse. Okay. And the fact of the matter is that these rates were not raised properly. I'm sorry that they weren't raised properly. We can't look backward. We got to look forward. And just think about that. $25 a month. Now, I know for some ratepayers, $25 a month is a lot of money. So, you know, one has to be very sensitive to that. But you can't have a sewer system that fails. I mean, think about that. Sewer on the streets, cholera, disease, whatever that might be. And in fact, Daniel, the sewer plant actually did fail on a number of occasions. Thank goodness we did raise the rates. It was not fun doing so. And once again, I would contend when people ask me, Tim, what mistake do you think that the city councils made in the past? Is they didn't raise the rates properly over an extended amount of time. And we know by the recall election why they didn't raise the rates. If you raise the rates, if you do the right thing, if it can be maligned, as I think what Mr. Starr did, he put out this false narrative. The corrupt people are still in power, he was letting people think. And they're raising your rates to bail out the system. That he never said that, but he inferred that. And the public made that connection. It was a powerful, powerful connection. And a lot of people really thought that the rates didn't need to be raised, and they believed him. They believed that the sewer plant only needed $12 million, you know? And so thank goodness we fixed the problem. The system now is working better than it's probably ever worked since its inception. And that's another major accomplishment. We did the right thing. And sometimes, Daniel, in politics, when you do the right thing, you pay a price for it. That's all there is to it.
I do want to ask you about that 2018, the recall election that targeted 4 of the 5 council members at the time, yourself, Mayor Pro Tem Ramirez, and Councilmen Perello and Madrigal, because you guys made the decision to vote in favor of raising the utility rates. And at that following meeting, Mr. Starr came and served you guys with recall petitions. Now, prior to that recall, I believe it was like 2 decades ago, before that, Oxnard had been in another recall election. So this group was the second recall election in Oxnard's history. How did you feel? And I know you just made the comment that in politics, sometimes when you do the right thing, it's not always favored. But how was that for you? How was that experience to know that the group of you guys, for doing what was right to protect the health and welfare of the community, and you guys were getting slapped with a recall?
It shows that as the attack on the Capitol 2 weeks ago, that democracy and any nation, and it's part of the human condition, I would contend, are fragile. And I don't think anybody in America and anybody around the world would have ever thought that what happened at the US Capitol several weeks ago could have ever happened. But I think somewhat the equivalent of that happened right here. People were misled. They were misled to think that the decision makers were corrupt. The current council, or the one I served on, I was elected as mayor to clean up this stuff, and that's what I did. I accomplished that along with members of the council and the city staff, hardworking city staff. But to face a recall election when you know you're doing the right thing, kind of is like it's like a captain of a ship. It's like, if this ship's going down, then I'm going down with the ship. I'm not going to bail out of this ship. I'm going down with the ship, right? Thank goodness the recall election did not succeed, but it came close to succeeding. And it shows you how mutable human beings can be. They can be given. It's why we have an electoral college, by the way. I mean, a lot of people don't make the connection, but we have an electoral college in the United States of America, and we do not directly elect the president of the United States because the masses of people can be misled, and they can be misled by a despotic leader and somebody who doesn't have the public's best interest in mind. And for that, among other reasons, there's also a big state, small state. There's a variety of issues, proportional representation behind the electoral college. But one of the major things is the founding fathers believed that the masses. And at the time, not everybody was well read. There was a high rate of illiteracy in the United States at the time of the founding of the Republic. But people tend not to always be as educated on the issues as they should be, and they can be easily misled. And they were misled in that recall election. There's no question about it. And whether the author himself felt like he was consciously misleading people, I really question. Sometimes I've thought about that a lot. I don't know if he really thought that he was misleading people. He might have thought that what he was thinking was the truth, but it wasn't the truth. It was false. And thank goodness that recall election did not prevail.
Thanks, Tim. Again, a huge amount of accomplishments over your time, including these low points. And sometimes doing the right thing isn't always the easiest. I do want to talk about, as you are aware, Mayor Pro Tem Carmen Ramirez, who now is Supervisor Ramirez for the 5th District, because of her winning the election for the supervisor race, opened her seat for the 2nd District. What are your thoughts? Do you believe the council made the right choice of doing an appointment first, and then in November doing a special election for any candidate to essentially only be in office for a year and then have to run for re-election again in November 2022?
I think that the choice that the council made was the best choice, the hybrid. I think that was because it was expedient in the sense that you get an appointed member of the council on board right away, so that you don't have tie votes, 3-3 votes, even though that can be worked out too. So having 7 council members voting, I think, is very important. Yes, I do believe it gives a leg up to whoever's appointed. There's no question about that in my mind. However, ultimately then turning it over to the voters, I think is a good compromise. And just recently, when Kamala Harris was elected as vice president, then the U.S. Senate seat had to be filled. And then, that person too, and others, when they stand re-election, if they've done a decent job or they haven't done anything controversial, their chances are pretty good about maintaining that seat. So I actually think it was a good decision. It was, Daniel, I'm a centrist, politically, I'm a centrist. I try to find a compromise, something that I think weighs the pros and cons of all issues. And you try to get that pro and con down to several percentage points. You try to make it as precise as possible so that when you're making a decision, it's the most balanced decision. That definitely was a balanced decision. I applaud the city council and the city manager and the staff for recommending that. I think it was a great idea.
Now, I do want to comment on that you saying that you're a centrist, because I firsthand had seen you try to find a compromise between 2 parties in the city council. During one of the meetings, it was a public hearing. It was a market. The owners wanted to sell specialty type of alcohol. And I saw you really try to keep both sides happy of that. Unfortunately, it didn't go anywhere. The upholding of the denial continued for the permit, but I saw what it needed to be done was an elected official trying to find the compromise, the even ground between both sides. That memory always stays with me because that was in the beginning of my time. So I appreciate that, because it really shows that elected officials really do care about trying to find the common ground between both sides.
Yes.
So I just wanted to make that comment on that.
Oh, thanks.
So Tim, you are retired from teaching. You are retired from the city council. What are the plans for the future? Are there any future endeavors in public office again?
Right.
Or is there just Tim Flynn walking around the city of Oxnard?
Right. Just randomly and errantly knocking on doors. Well, look, so I believe, everything happens for a reason. I didn't say this when I was interviewed, but now having a little bit of time to think about the most recent election, I believe, Daniel, it is and it was providence, and it was divine providence. I think that when you feel in your heart that you should have won the election because of the effort that was put into it. And again, I want to say Carmen Ramirez is a really good friend of mine. She is a wonderful human being, very smart, very honest, highly competent. She's going to make a great county supervisor. I believe I was a better candidate in that race. And I am in part because I hustled with walking door to door. Now, again, that was my advantage over her. She decided not to walk. I would imagine because of COVID, and that I think probably was a very smart decision. But I just feel that, things happen in life. You don't understand why they happen. And when I thought about this election already, the most recent election, hundreds and hundreds of times, I can't tell you how many times it's gone around and around and around. And my conclusion is, it's providence. And providence means, hey, man, it seems awkward now, or it seems unlikely, or it seems almost unbelievable that you lost that in that particular race. But the fact of the matter is something better is going to happen for you and or to you. And I believe it's already starting to happen. I mean, number one, as I told you before, I'm in the best shape of my life. I mean, I am going to be 62. I weigh the same amount that I weighed in high school right now. I feel fantastic. I'm ready to start walking. I'm ready to start campaigning right away. Unfortunately, there's not anything to campaign for, but I don't know. Maybe I could maybe I could, I don't know. I was going to tell a joke. I won't tell that joke, but anyway, so already good things are coming out of it. And I got a trip planned to Australia and New Zealand, that is going to be just something I've always wanted to do. Another thing I want to do is I want to go to Mexico to learn how to speak Spanish fluently. I'm really good with languages. Actually, was a German teacher for 15 years. So I have an aptitude with languages. I do speak Spanish, but it's not fluent. And I want to be able to address my future constituents. I want to be able to address them in English and in Spanish, although I'm a big proponent of saying, you better learn the language of the country that you're living in. You're doing yourself and everybody else a disfavor if you don't learn the language. And by the way, that's why I wanted English subtitles on the council meetings, not a Spanish translation. I wanted people to hear English and I wanted them to see Spanish. Now, some people point out, well, wait a minute, there are indigenous people and there are people that can't read, right? So those are legitimate points. But I have so many things that I want to accomplish, and I certainly am very interested in running for, continuing to be a public servant. So as much as I think that might entail an election, maybe it won't at some point. Maybe it's another job that I can do, something else I can do where I can have a real influence on improving people's lives. That's why I'm in it. It's not about anything other than service, public service. And I think that word public service really is at the core of my being. It talks about how I was raised. And the word I kept looking for and I couldn't think of this word. The word it's another Greek word, ethos. And ethos is such an important word. It's a collection, a sense of your values. What do you value in life? What's most important to you? And I know that success is happiness. So success could involve money, but money's not it. Material things aren't. It's what is going to make you happy. And that to me is success. And I'm a happy person, so I feel successful, thank goodness. And I know that there's something bigger and better waiting for me than being county supervisor. It's very hard to accept. I'm human like anyone else. I am sometimes overly optimistic. My wife used to get really, really upset with me because she'd say, "Oh, I don't want to hear that anymore. You're too optimistic. I just stop talking that way." So I'm very optimistic. I think that there's going to be something really good in store for me and for this community and for this world. And so I'm really excited to be in the position I'm in. Don't want to make a habit of losing, but something, Daniel, the biggest winners in politics are also the biggest losers. And you don't need to be a historian to know that. And so it goes with the territory. And I'm taking my lumps. Don't like it. But you know what? I'm stronger today. I'm more determined today than I've ever been in my life. So I'm anxious to serve again and be a public servant.
Well, Tim, thank you very much for joining me in this conversation. I appreciate your insights on your accomplishments as well as the lows that the city council faced. I appreciate your insight on the council's decision on how to fill the District 2 city council seat. And I can appreciate your optimism for the future. It's a breath of fresh air, and I think that's really what Wednesday yesterday proved, that it's new beginnings, it's a new path, and you know, it's an opportunity to grow. So thank you for joining me in this conversation and all of the information that you provided as well.
Thank you, Daniel.
Ladies and gentlemen, please be sure to join us next week as we have Rodney Medina join us as we speak about cannabis, the city's cannabis ordinance and policies, and the benefits of cannabis. Don't worry, I'm not a user, but there are benefits to using cannabis. That's all right here on Oxnard Live at 4 o'clock next week. So, Oxnard Live, all live and 100% real. Have a great night, everyone. Thank you again, Tim.
Thank you, Daniel.